In a world where crime runs rampant, an elite team is formed. Slingshot, Mr. Steel, Dr. Lightning, Winter Freeze, Superhero Guy, Carl. And together that makes
a complete waste of space.
Who better than me, the self-appointed king of benches?
What the hell makes you the king of benches?
I don't know, I bought more than anyone else.
That just makes you an idiot.
Anyway, who better than someone who owns too many benches, which is probably two at best, to explain to you what to look for when you're out searching for that new bench. So in this video, I've broken it down into my 10 categories that I think are most important when you're out searching for that bench. And that's whether you're getting a flat or adjustable bench. And for each category, I'll give an example from one of the many we have here in this gym, which, as Winnie has noted, has gotten a little out of hand. The construction of the bench is debatably the most important category, and that's why we're starting off with it. And that's because it can determine some of the other categories as well, but they all play an important role. Essentially, we're looking at the quality of the materials used to create the bench. This is also where we gauge if the price of the bench matches the quality, as better quality materials and construction are going to cost more, but also last longer. And though I have benches here ranging from $100 to $700, I'd argue it's not a piece you want to go too cheaply on, as there can be vast differences in benches as you go up in price. Though admittedly, many of these benches are overbuilt for your average home gym. So is the Rogue AB 3.0, which is probably the best built bench I have here, 4 times the bench the Flybird 299 is, because that's the actual price difference between the two of them. It probably is 4 times the bench, but the better question might be, do we all need that much bench? While bench construction looks at all aspects of the bench, you also want to focus on the build of the frame, the steel, and how it's all put together. All of these things combine to determine the weight of the bench, and as a generalization, a big beefy bitch is more likely to take care of you than a little one. Heavy gauge steel and welded components are much more likely to create a solid and durable bench. Now, all benches are going to have some bolted components, but if the major ones are welded, that's probably a good indication of its quality. The way the bench is put together is going to play a major role in this category, stability. It doesn't matter how pretty all the parts and pieces are when assembled. If it's not a stable bench, it's a bad one. And we're looking for something here that's more stable than my sexuality as a teen. That stability comes from the frame and the leg layout, as well as all the things I mentioned in the previous category. Wider legs and feet create more stability, but if they become too big, they'll inhibit your ability to use the bench, store it, and move it. Personally, I like benches with 1 leg up front versus an H or 4 leg design, and that's just because it creates additional space in the front of the bench, so I have that freedom when I'm benching, for example. Those legs don't get in the way, and it makes it easier for me to generate leg drive. But it's just nice to also have that freedom during any exercise. The trade-off is you can lose some stability with that tripod design, but with a well-designed sturdy bench, it's not normally an issue. Another thing you'll want to consider if your bench isn't a tank like some of these ones is that bench's grip on the ground. Not to pick on Flybird too much here, but this lightweight bench combined with these weird cylindrical caps they have on the bottom of this model make it a little more prone, not prune, to slide around on the ground during certain exercises. Probably a bit less exciting than some of the others, but still important, is weight capacity. And like stability, it's going to play off the categories that came before it. A heavier, welded, well-made bench with that thick gauge steel, a solid frame, and a good leg layout is going to have a higher capacity. I know a lot of people like to get hung up on that final number, and as a generalization, a bigger number means a more robust bench, but that's not always true. We probably don't all need 1,000 pound capacities, but it does make you feel a little bit better. When I reviewed the Rogue AB 3.0, I noted that they don't even list a weight capacity, and I didn't think it was an error then, and I don't think it's an error now. And you can really tell when you're using that thing. It's a super solid bench. The company that manufactures, or at least distributes the product, plays a role as well. Every video I make, somebody comments, what about this obscure company or product? And I'm not downplaying those companies that popped up during COVID or that are rebranding Chinese equipment, but what I am saying is a company with a long track record of quality and service to back it up should have more value than one that doesn't, which is why you'll often see Rogue products resell really well and Titan ones not. And that's not as much a knock on Titan as it is a compliment to Rogue. Are they perfect? No, but there's a reason they still rule the space, even if they have slipped a little bit recently. Along those same lines is the packaging, shipping, and assembly. It doesn't matter how pretty it looks on the website if it arrives damaged. Now, companies are always going to try to put themselves in the best light, which they probably should, and I'm a little more forgiving for budget equipment, but when my stuff arrives, I still want it to look new. Most companies now ship their benches in pieces to save on shipping. So it's a good idea to consider how much time and effort it's going to take before that bench is actually usable. When I bought my Rep AB4100, that thing was a joke to put together. It really took no time at all, but the Rogue AB 3.0, I'm not going to say it took serious effort, but it did take a little while. It doesn't matter how big of a bench you're packing if you can't fit it anywhere. And although everyone is built differently, so they're going to have their own wants and needs, you're going to want to take into consideration the footprint of the bench, as well as its pad length, height, and width. One of the biggest issues home gym owners have is space. That and maybe hoping your wife still supports you after she finds those receipts. So that footprint can be a big deal. Can the bench store vertically or fold up, and how much space does it actually take when in use? You'll also want to check the pad height and length. If you look at the Rep AB 5200 versus the 4100, those pad lengths are pretty different, even if both functional. With the 5200, I can bench on just the back pad and ignore the gap, but that length adds to the footprint and weight, and depending on the exercise you're doing, that pad could get in the way. If you don't have a preference or a ton of experience, then I would just use the IPF specs for guidance, which is 16.5 to 17.5 inches from the floor to the top of the pad, and then 11.5 to 12.5 inches on width, though they do make fat pads for those of us that need another few inches. Regardless of whether you plan to compete or not, those dimensions fit most people and should allow you to use leg drive when benching, and if you decide to compete later on, you'll already be used to it. But if not, there's still enough options to make pretty much anyone happy. Your connection to the bench is the pad, so a good pad is integral to the performance of that bench, and with foam, it's a bit of a balancing act. You want something that's supportive and dense, but it's also got to be comfortable. Something that's got enough padding, that's uniform, compresses evenly, and returns back to shape when you're done using it. One of my biggest complaints, okay, most of them, about the Rogue AB 3.0 was the original pad. It's stiff and the grip, in my opinion, is lacking, and after months of use, I can honestly say it's the least liked bench here, at least out of the high-end benches. And personally, I just like Rep's vinyl. It's got enough give and is thick enough to be comfortable, but also supportive, and the grip is about perfect for me. It keeps me in place and is easy to set up during exercises. It's no Thompson fat pad, but that thing doesn't fit on all benches, which is something we'll talk about in a minute. The next thing you want to look at is durability, because I want something that looks and acts the same after years of rubbing up against my ugly ass. If you're looking at an adjustable bench, you'll also want to consider the pad gap. That's the space between the back and the seat. Nowadays, we're spoiled with options in that mid to high-end level, and those gaps seem to be getting smaller. But not everybody's spending like me on my budget home gym, and not all benches are created equally. The problem with having an excessive gap is that getting stuck in that crack isn't always comfortable, and it's not always a place everybody enjoys being in. So there are benches like Rep's AB 5000, an absolute beast of a unit that can always be set to not have a gap, but even benches like Rogue's AB 3.0 or Rep's AB 4100 have gaps that are so small that you'd probably never even think about it. Along the same lines of that last point is mobility, and yes, this one was added because of Winnie. Anybody who's been watching the channel for long enough now knows that infamous clip of Winnie moving the AB 5000. And yes, we all know why it's such a popular clip. The real issue with having all these benches, besides the fact that I couldn't justify them about 9 benches ago, is that they can be a pain to move. And that's regardless of the fact that they take up all of my space. Now sure, with some of these Flybird benches, because they're foldable and lightweight, they're easy to move, but at what cost? A few of these others weigh 125 pounds, and it's not awful to move with the handle and wheels, but it's definitely something to take into consideration because, believe me, they can be tedious to move around. The adjustability and ease of use is going to play a large role in what I can get out of the bench. If I hate using it, I'm going to find excuses not to, and then what value does it truly hold? For a flat bench, there's really not much to say, but for an adjustable bench, we're looking at the number of back and seat positions that it has. Now, the more the merrier, but I'm probably shooting for around 7 back and 3 seat positions. Sure, benches like Rogue's AB 3.0 have 10 and 3, but I rarely find myself actually using them all. They're definitely nice, but not entirely necessary. We also care about the actual angles on the bench. Are they logically laid out like Rep's AB 4100 where it's every 15 degrees, or is it something like Flybird's where I'm really not sure where they came up with these numbers? And along those same lines, it's nice when those angles are labeled in some way, preferably lasered and not stickers or something else that could just wear away. So the Superbench Pro with 11 positions is great, but most of the time I have no idea which angle I've locked into. Not only do we care about positions, but how quick and easy is it to adjust? The ladder system has really blown up in popularity, and probably for good reason. It couldn't be simpler or faster. Now that doesn't mean it's the only system. Ironmaster has a unique foot pedal mechanism that's really quick and convenient, and the AB5000 uses pop pins that lock into place and create an incredibly stable, if not a little bit slow, of a bench to adjust. I often find things that try to do too many things don't excel at any one, but with a home gym, space is often a premium, so there's got to be a bit of a give and take. And when it comes down to it, an adjustable bench is the more versatile choice, with a flat bench being more limited, but also cheaper. Some of us are lucky enough to get both, but if you can't, I would look at getting a good adjustable bench. Now, if you're severely limited in budget or are competing, then a flat bench might be a better choice. And from there, you're going to have to ask yourself, what exactly do you want your bench to be able to do? Do you want it to be able to decline? Are you looking to add attachments to it? And what kind of attachments? The king of versatility is still the Superbench Pro, but there are other benches that allow some attachments as well. Speaking of attachments, some benches have pads that can be swapped for others. So I can take a Thompson fat pad and put it on a Rep FB5000, for example, or even put it on a Rogue Monster utility bench. Now, not everybody's going to want to do that, but I would recommend checking if the company you're purchasing from allows you to buy replacement pads for your bench in case you want to for one reason or another down the line. All of the benches I've mentioned here today have been reviewed by us, so I'm going to put a cute little playlist together for you in case you want to spend your entire weekend watching our reviews. Which of course you're going to want to do because it's the only way we're going to grow. That is if you use those affiliate links, because that's how we've purchased literally everything here. And with your support, that's how we've grown to the size we have. And we truly appreciate you for it. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you next week.